new bombshell revelations about the probable patient zero have reignited the global debate around the COVID lab leak. In fact, you were among the first experts to talk about the lab origins and term these developments a smoking gun. Why do you say so?
So these are very serious allegations. They're not yet proven, but should it be proven that these three researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology were the first people to be infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that would be definitive proof that the pandemic stems from a research-related accident in Wuhan. It's not yet proven. These are very serious allegations. The United States government, it will be releasing declassified documents this week, and hopefully that will shed more light on this very, very important topic.
Right, Jamie, but for a common viewer, could you throw light on gain of function when it comes to study on viruses, and what are the possible risks around it?
So gain of function is a broad term. Anyone who is getting gene therapy, anyone who is has been inoculated with an mRNA vaccine has been the beneficiary of quote unquote gain of function research. Within gain of function research, there is a much narrower area of gain of function research on pathogens of pandemic potential. And the controversy here is whether that type of research was being done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which we know that it was, and whether any accidents were made in that process. And that's why this is so controversial. And that's why everybody on Earth, and certainly everybody in India, whatever the official numbers are, the actual numbers of COVID deaths in India are probably around 4 million people. And everybody in India has a relative who was died or affected by COVID-19. We should all be demanding full transparency and accountability on the origins issue. Again, the circumstantial evidence so far, in my view, weighs heavily in the direction of a research-related origin, but we need to keep digging.
Right, but the doctor who is mentioned as the alleged patient zero has disappeared from the scene days after the revelations. Do you think Beijing's cover-up continue till date around COVID origins, in your opinion?
Beijing's cover-up from day one has been an international crime of historic proportions, in my view. They have destroyed evidence, hidden samples, prevented a meaningful international investigation. They have imprisoned Chinese journalists for asking the most basic questions. They have a gag order preventing Chinese scientists from saying or writing anything about pandemic origins without prior government approval. And it goes on and on to this day. China will do everything to prevent the kind of full accountability for COVID-19 origins that's required. And that's why the rest of us, including the Indian government, the American government, and everybody, need to do everything possible to push for and vocally demand answers.
Jamie, for weeks, international media reported the mystery virus in China at the end of 2019 without China acknowledging the SARS coronavirus. Do you think that China wanted to control the narrative before controlling the spread of virus?
Oh, absolutely. It's not even a question. We know that China, the Chinese government, knowingly lied to the World Health Organization and the international community about this spillover and about the initial outbreak. And frankly, in the time when the Chinese government was knowingly lying, the Chinese government was trying to cover up, and they were putting the rest of us at risk because the world wasn't able to start responding. And this is a totally avoidable pandemic. Had China been totally transparent and accountable from day one, the entire pandemic may never have happened at all. The great Indian thinker and philosopher and economist Amartya Sen talks about that famines not happening in environments where there's open access to information. The same applies here. We have all suffered from a pandemic, which is the direct result of the unique pathologies of the Chinese state.
Right. And of course, as we're speaking about Dr. Wanhu, the alleged patient zero was considered China's Batwoman Shen Xingli's star pupil. However, multiple reports cited her confiding to friends about the possibility of the lab leak. Do you think new revelations give credibility to lab leak origins not being a conspiracy theory? How do you read into that?
Well, the possibility that COVID-19 stems from a lab accident in Wuhan was never a conspiracy theory. From day one, it should have been considered a primary origin hypothesis. It's just absurd that that hasn't been the case. And so, as I said up top, if it should be proven that Wanhu was the original, the first person, patient zero, to be infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, then that's just the answer. Then we know for certain that COVID-19 stems from an accidental lab incident. And then the question will be, well, what do we do? And I certainly think it will be appropriate for countries like India that have suffered so tremendously from this, again, totally avoidable crisis, to demand reparations, to start using the Indian legal system, international law, to try to demand accountability. We're not there yet. I don't think the quote unquote lab leak origin is yet proven, and we need to keep digging, and we need to follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Jamie, as you break that down for us and draw things into perspective, on the other hand, how do you think the world community, the WHO and the UN in general, should act and pressure China into providing transparent information and access to the Wuhan lab's activities in 2019?
We need to do everything possible. There are some people who now say, well, let's forget what happened with COVID-19 because we need to move forward. We need to establish a pandemic treaty about the future. But there's no possible way to move forward on a basis of transparency and accountability if we don't establish the principles of transparency and accountability now. If the Chinese government can get away with the unnecessary death of 20 million people around the world, then the next time, if we're faced with a similar fact pattern, they will have every incentive to follow the exact game plan. If we want accountability in the future, we must establish that principle now, and the Indian government must play a central role in leading that charge.
Jamie, before I let you go, my last question would be, what are the loopholes or challenges, in your opinion, to unearth this entire episode?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you reframe the question?
What are the loopholes or challenges that you perceive?
Yeah, sorry, Brad, the audio is breaking up, but I think you're asking about the challenges going forward. So the big challenge is that the Chinese government is engaged in an ongoing cover-up, trying to do everything possible to prevent this kind of investigation. And it's not going to be easy. I mean, the Chinese government has tried to hide the crimes of Mao Zedong, responsible for the deaths of 47 million Chinese people. They've tried to overcome the crimes in Xinjiang and Tibet. So we know that's what they are going to do. The question is, what are we going to do? And there are a lot of issues with China, but we can't just forget these 20 million dead people, all of the suffering, because if we try to move forward blindly, we'll be back in this exact same situation again.